What's up, Lorcana YouTube community? I'm super excited to showcase my brand new Beyond the Horizon Sapphire and Steel deck I have created. I created this deck just because I got tired of losing into Ruby Sapphire or Amethyst decks, or pretty much just decks in general that drew a lot of cards, and Beyond the Horizon is the perfect card to counter those strategies. Beyond the Horizon is a 7 uninkable card, and it's actually a sync together card. So you can use 2 or more characters to use this card, and you're actually able to discard your hand and draw up until you have 3 cards. The awesome thing about this effect is you can do it to your opponent as well, or again, you can just use it on yourself. The reason why this card is really good and why that discarding effect is really important is because against these decks that like to draw a lot of cards and have big explosive cards for the mid to late game, for example, Be Prepared, Sisu, Hades, stuff like that, you can just discard your opponent's hand and force them to draw a whole nother 3 cards, and maybe those 3 cards that they get weren't part of their strategy for the next couple turns. If you guys enjoyed the deck profile, go ahead and leave a like and drop a comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this new Beyond the Horizon archetype in Sapphire Steel. And if you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and hit that sub button. I do want to mention that I will be doing the deck profile a little bit more differently just because I want to focus more on the details, lines of plays, and overall strategy behind the deck and why I picked all these cards. So I'll be going over each card one by one, and again, I'll have timestamps down below so you can always go back and listen to key points talking about certain cards. Alright, to start off the deck profile, we're playing 4 copies of Tipo and 4 copies of Sell the Azurite Sea as our turn 2 ramp strategy. Why do we want to have a turn 2 ramp? Well, because we want to be able to play Beyond the Horizon, but we want to sing it instead of actually hardcasting it. And to sing Beyond the Horizon, if you notice, we're not playing any 7 cost characters, so we're usually using 2 characters to sing Beyond the Horizon. So if we're able to get a 4 cost character on the board, followed by a 5 cost character on turn 4, since you are able to ramp on turn 2, you can sing Beyond the Horizon. Now, we're not playing any one-drop characters, just because one-drop characters aren't going to be really useful when it comes to being able to sing Beyond the Horizon. So as our pseudo one-drop character, we're playing 4 copies of Belle and 4 copies of Popsicle. Now, this is really important as far as the strategy with the deck. One being Belle is going to be an amazing turn 1 character you can play with Popsicle as far as offense and defense. She should be able to sustain board control for the first 3 turns, so you don't have to worry about your opponent getting out of hand with lore or putting any pesky characters early on. And then, just in case you don't need to focus on attacking the board, for example, if you're on the play, a turn 1 Belle followed by ramp on turn 2, and then you bring out your 4 cost character on turn 3. That means on turn 4, you're already able to sing Beyond the Horizon with Belle, or for example, Tala, or any of your other 4 cost or higher characters. Followed by Belle, we have 4 copies of Pete. Needs no explanation. I say it in all my deck profiles. One of the most important cards in the deck, one of the best cards in the meta. I wouldn't play any copies less than 4. And Pete, pairing it with one of our 4 cost characters or higher, can sing Beyond the Horizon. Followed by P, I'm going to go ahead and skip over to the 4 copies of Grandma Tala. Grandma Tala is a very consistent 4 cost character that you can play on turn 3 after you ramp on turn 2. You're able to look at the top 2 cards of your deck and add one to your hand. So a pseudo draw card, very nice to find our key pieces. And then this is where we actually start with our singers to enable Along Came Zeus. So always having a turn 3 4 cost character to be able to sing Zeus the following turn is a super strong play on the play or on the draw to get rid of a threat on the board. After Grandma Tala, we're actually playing a 1-1 split of Flint and Dr. Calcio. So the reason why I have this split is just for this deck profile in particular. I wanted to talk about how you can actually use 2 copies of either or you can get away with the 1-1 split. Flit is actually going to be useful against evasives. He is a 3-4 hitter and quest for 2, and on your turn he gains evasives. So for turn 3, after you ramp on turn 2, you're able to bring him out, and for him to answer opposing genies, Diablos, Peter Pans, I think is super important. Evasives are very annoying to deal with, and Sapphire and Steel always had a problem to deal with them, so playing Flint on your turn 3 is super huge, and worst case scenario, he can sing Along Came Zeus, and he's already another 4 cost character that you can use to pair with Pete or Belle to sing Beyond the Horizon. Followed by Flint, I'm showing the 1 copy of Dr. Calcio. Dr. Calcio is also a 3-4 stat line character, only quest for 1, but his effect is as long as he has no damage, he gets +2 resist. So with no damage on him, he's actually a 3/6. And if you have Cogsworth on the board, no steel deck is going to be able to remove Dr. Calcio. So that means Dr. Calcio is just perfect against steel decks or anything low to the ground. But you got to have at least 6 to 7 4-drop characters, so you can always consistently have a 4-cost character on your turn 3 after you ramp on turn 2. These are going to be very important again to sing removal cards like Strength, Zeus, or be one of the characters to sing Beyond the Horizon with. Getting into our 5 drops, we have 4 copies of Cogsworth, 3 copies of Beast, and 3 copies of Namaari. So this is pretty standard as you've seen in all my other Sapphire and Steel lists. The only difference is I'm usually on 4 copies of Beast and 4 copies of Namaari. So the reason why we're on a 3-3 split is because if you notice, we're actually playing 4 copies of Tamatoa, and that's pretty much the main reason. When I get into Tamatoa, I'll go into more detail, but pretty much since Tamatoa is like a pseudo draw card, being able to recycle back the popsicles, I think it was, okay to cut down the 1 Beast and 1 Namaari, just because if you notice, we're also playing 2 dimes. But you want to have at least 3 copies of Beast and Namaari because these are going to be amazing pseudo draw engine cards that you can always play on your turn 4 after you ramp on turn 2. And getting these guys out on turn 4 is huge, being on the play or on the draw. For a more defensive approach, you're always going to go with Namaari because Namaari is able to have X amount of attack depending on the cards in your discard, so she can usually just one-shot any card in the mid game. And then her other effect, being able to draw a card and discard a card at the start of your turn, is huge, just to get rid of dead uninkable cards and keep finding your key pieces that you need in the mid to the late game. And Beast is just, again, one of the best draw cards in the game. You force your opponent to answer him. If not, you're going to keep drawing a card every single turn. And even if your opponent pings Beast, that's okay because Beast on your turn turns to a card that can attack for 7. That's pretty much can one-shot anything. So these 2 cards are just very important to have as a pseudo draw engine. You need to have these cards or else the deck won't work. And there's a world where you can cut 1 copy of Tamatoa and add in another copy of Beast or Namaari. I would probably add in the 4th Namaari if anything. It was really hard to find the room to fit in the 4th one, but if you did want to add in another card, I would cut 1 copy of Tamatoa. So 4 copies of Cogsworth. Cogsworth is the best card in Sapphire and Steel right now because we're in a very Steel dominant meta. He's pretty much only dead into Ruby Sapphire, and the cool thing about that is in that matchup you can always ink him. But Cogsworth is super playable. Again, one of the best cards because he's going to help you maintain board control. All these other removal songs that aren't like Amethyst, Emerald, and that are just straight up, bounce cards. Anything that pings damage, once you have Cogsworth on board, you're going to be able to trade more efficiently. Your characters are going to live through removal, and that's pretty much how you win against these Lord of the Ground decks. Onto our 6-cost characters, we're playing 4 copies of Tamatoa. Being able to recycle your popsicles and stay in the game against these Ruby Sapphire decks or any Amethyst decks in general is super awesome. And then the reason I'm on 4 is because I actually went up to 2 lucky dimes. I think this is very important to win against your Ruby Sapphire decks because once you play Tamatoa, you want to force your opponent to sweat and keep cards like Hideaway in their hands. And if your Tamatoa gets to live and you get to play out a free dime, it doesn't matter if your opponent hides away because just getting 2 free lore is huge. And if your opponent doesn't answer Lucky Dime, you're more than likely going to win that game if Lucky Dime sticks around for another 2 to 3 turns. There's a world where if you don't have a lot of Ruby Sapphire or you think the two dimes are too cloggy, you can cut 1 Lucky Dime, and I'd also cut 1 copy of Tamatoa, and that's where you can find space to fit in the 4th Beast and the 4th Namaari. For our other 6-cost character, we're playing 4 copies of Tinkerbell. So Tinkerbell is very important. A lot of people think you need Grab Your Swords to make Tinkerbell good, and that's completely false. So the one thing I want to say is when you're at 6 ink, and just in case you don't have popsicles or lucky dimes in your hand, Tamatoa is useless. So that's why we have Tinkerbell, because she's able to come on the board, ping 1 damage to everything on the board, and then once she comes out, that's really where the board control comes in, because your opponent doesn't want to exert characters, because if Tinkerbell is able to attack and destroy something, she can ping 2 damage to something else. Onto our actions, we're playing 3 copies of Fire the Cannons. So 3 copies of Fire Cannons, I think I've said it before in my other deck profiles, it's going to be mandatory in all Sapphire and Steel lists just because of how important it is to get rid of a turn 1 Rhino, a Diablo, a Cinderella, or any just pesky 1-drop characters on the board. And we're playing Sail the Azurite Sea, so with that 1 ink extra, the Fire the Cannons pairs really well, and you don't have to worry about Fire the Cannons being a dead card in some matchups because Namaari, you're able to draw a card and discard a card. The cool thing about Fire the Cannons as well is since we're only playing Belle as our alternate one-drop character to play on turn 1, when you're on the draw, Fire the Cannon is a very strong play to play on your turn 1 just in case you don't have that Belle. But yeah, super mandatory. I wouldn't cut any copies of Fire the Cannons. As I mentioned earlier in the video, for our ramp strategy, we're playing 4 copies of Tipo and 4 copies of Sail the Azurite Sea. Turn 2 ramp is just super important, again, to get out that 4 cost character on turn 3 to be able to sing Zeus or Beyond the Horizon. I think the turn 2 strategy is the way to go. Turn 3 just felt a little bit awkward with Pleakley, Detective Mickey, Fishbone Quill, stuff like that. And Sail the Azurite Sea is a very strong card in the mid to the late game just because it's always going to be a draw card. For our removal, we're playing 4 copies of Strength of the Raging Fire. Just a very strong card, maybe the best removal card in the game. If you go turn 1 Belle, turn 2 Tipo, turn 3 4 drop, turn 4 5 drop, turn 3, turn 4, you're able to sing Strength and deal 3 to 4 ping damage, so that's huge. Yeah, I wouldn't cut this card again, especially because we're playing Tipo, so having that 1 extra character to sing Strength is huge. And then we have 4 copies of Along Came Zeus. So coming from Amethyst Steel, winning my Sen Champs, I realized how strong Along Came the Zeus is, and I was like, you know what, let's play 4 in Sapphire and Steel, and this is probably the best decision I've made in a long time. Zeus is just a very strong card to answer opposing genies, opposing sharks, pretty much anything that's annoying, Zeus will answer it. And since we're focusing on a turn 2 ramp and always getting out a 4 cost character on turn 3, being able to consistently sing Zeus on the draw is huge, just because getting rid of a threat like that, you gain tempo back, and that's pretty much how you win on the draw a lot of the times. That's it for our removal, and now we get to go on to the main key card of the deck, and that's going to be 3 copies of Beyond the Horizon. So first, why are we playing 3 copies and not 4? I think 4 gets a little bit too cloggy, especially with the high cost card that it is. I think 3 is fine. And we're also playing Tamatoa, Beast, and Namaari, so we have these other draw cards. So we don't need to rely on 4. The reason why Beyond the Horizon works and why it's a huge punish against these Ruby Amethyst decks, Ruby Sapphire, just any decks in general that draw a lot of cards, is because Beyond the Horizon allows you to discard your opponent's hand, and they have to draw until they have 3 cards. The cool thing about that effect, you can do it to yourself, you can do it to both players, up to you. The reason why the discard part is very important is, for example, if you're going against Ruby Sapphire and you're going to turn 5, 6, they're getting ready to play those Be Prepared, to play those Sisus, and if you sing Beyond the Horizon there, you're going to get rid of those cards, and you're going to make them draw 3, and it's going to be a whole different strategy, and they might not have the answers they needed to wipe your board. That's huge. Against Amethyst decks, they set up their rabbits, genies, finders, keepers. Doing a Beyond the Horizon after they do that is just hilarious, because you get rid of the cards they've been holding on to, the cards they needed in that point, and you force them to have or use a brand new strategy. This is why this deck is really good, and it's the best counter to counter these greedy decks that draw a lot. So again, all these Amethyst decks or Ruby Sapphire in general, if you were losing to those decks using Sapphire and Steel, this is the best counter for that. To finish off the deck, we have our items. It's the 4 copies of Popsicle, as I mentioned earlier in the video. If you're playing Belle, you're playing 4 copies of Popsicle. It's one of the best turn 1 plays you can do as far as defense if you're able to get that Belle out. And for the mid to late game against these grindy decks, those Popsicles with Tamatoa are just going to be super key to stay in the game and allowing you to keep drawing cards. For our last item, it's going to be 2 copies of Lucky Dimes. I think this is very important to beat Ruby Sapphire. I found it in testing in all my other Sapphire and Steel lists, the best way to close out games against Ruby Sapphire is actually going to be Lucky Dime over McManners, just because there's a lot of Mauis, a lot of Scrooges, a lot of Battalifiers, a lot of hideaways. Even against Amethyst decks, you have Crabs, Foxes. So McManner just felt, just a weaker card when it comes to I'm trying to gain 2 to 4 lore. This package is going to be very important to beat Ruby Sapphire in the late game. If you take it out, do expect you're going to have a hard time winning that matchup. That's it for the deck profile. These are going to be my closing thoughts. The reason why I think Beyond the Horizon is in a very good spot in this meta and why it punishes these Amethyst, Ruby, Sapphire decks is because you're able to discard their hand after they draw all these cards in the early game, and they're keeping these pieces for the mid to the late game to answer your board. You getting rid of those cards and forcing them to draw a whole new 3 and giving them a new strategy to plan out, you're usually going to win in those spots because you have the board that you want. You chose the cards that you wanted to play. You knew what you were going to do ahead of time. So on the blind, that is a huge strategy, and you don't have to worry about these Lord of the Ground decks, you don't need Beyond the Horizon to win in those matchups. Beyond the Horizon, worst case scenario, you can always use it on yourself if you don't want to give your opponent a new hand. And against these Lord of the Ground decks like Amber Steel, Emerald Steel, Amethyst Steel, Emerald, Amethyst, you don't have to worry about Beyond the Horizon, because the core strategy behind Sapphire and Steel, being able to ramp and then get to Cogsworth out, that's where you just go for board control. You don't have to worry about their hand. You usually just win the board throughout overwhelming them with big cost characters. So that's the really cool thing about this deck, is you have those two lines of strategies. You can either go the Beyond the Horizon route against these decks that draw a lot, and against these decks that fight the board, that are trying to aggro you out. Forget about Beyond the Horizon. You have all these other low cost characters that you can fight the board against. Focus on ramping on turn 2 and getting that Cogsworth out as fast as possible, and then your draw engine, rely on Beast, Namaari, the Popsicle package to keep you in the game. If you guys enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, drop a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed already, please go ahead and hit that sub button. It helps the channel grow and it means a lot. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see y'all next time.